I look back now and I can see that what I was doing was redefining what my concept of family could look like, redefining what my identity within a family could look like.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Risa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm excited for today's episode. We have Amy joining us today. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Risa.
I am so excited to hear a little bit about your story, but before we get started with all of that, for anybody who doesn't know you, could you introduce yourself for us?
I sure can. My name is Amy Stone, and I am the host of the Art of Imperfect Adulting. I'm a mom and a stepmom and a wife and a sister and a daughter and all of those things. I am talking to you today from sunny South Florida, where it's not at all sunny today. We're having a little bit of a cool snap. And so I'm wearing one of the two sweaters that I own.
Did you have to dig it out?
I'm not in that point yet. I have a 2 day limit, and then I have to dig
Okay.
into the deep parts of my closet. And at that point, I go from wearing something that's cute-ish to rocking the is she like homeless? Like is she unhoused or is she just a Floridian who is wearing everything she owns?
Yeah, fair point. Fair point. Probably not a whole ton of use for some of that stuff where you're
Exactly.
at.
That's
Yeah.
right.
All right. Well, I love it. So you mentioned several things that you've got going on, many hats. This is our shameless plug section. So tell us what you've got going on, how folks can find your podcast and get connected with you if that's something that they're interested in resonates.
No, absolutely. I'd love for people to join me over at the Art of Imperfect Adulting, which is a podcast and streaming show where I share stories of choices and changes that people make and how that impacts the path of their life. And then I have two products. One is Stepparent Success School, and the other is a community, which I call the Village. So you can find all of that at imperfectadulting.com.
Wonderful. And that's so cool. Can you tell us a little bit about your community and the group that you mentioned?
Sure, I sure can. I'm happy to do that. So, in the way I see things, adulting is a long process and 18 to forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm building a community that bridges a lot of generations and a lot of interest groups. And there's a focus every single month. It's built on the premise that imperfection is a starting point and not necessarily a sign that something has gone wrong, and that we can work through these things with the help of somebody like me who has some coaching tools, but also the community aspect, a curated, loving, supporting, motivational community that comes together to help people move through transitions and changes that we go through.
Wonderful. That sounds awesome. And as always, we'll have all of that linked in our show notes. So make sure to link up with Amy if that's something that resonates.
Come visit, come play.
Yeah. All right. So tell me, we are doing one of our first drinks on the show. So tell us what recipe you're sharing today and why did you choose this one?
So, it came out, you were like, share a recipe. And I was like, what am I going to share? Hello. But we're recording this in January. People are not watching it in January, but we're recording it in January. And I do start every year with sort of a reset thing. And one of the things I reset is I do dry January. I have for lots of years. And so this is a mocktail. And so when you asked me for a recipe, I was like, sure, I'll share a drink. It's a mocktail for fun. The thing with mocktails is it can just be a drink.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be for dry January. It can just be a refreshing drink.
Yeah. And what I love is, you know, when I was reading the recipe, it has that element. It's not super duper complicated, but it seems like something special. And I think that, what parent doesn't need a little just time out, kind of time to this themselves to drink something that's maybe a little bit out of the ordinary of, just your water or your coffee and just give you a little boost of something. So I love
That's right.
it.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us, what are all the steps? How do you make your drink? I'll get mixing while we chat.
So I love that you say that it's not very complicated. I would say this is unbelievably simple. So I keep all this stuff like in my fridge at any given time. So there are three ingredients if you don't count the ice.
Okay.
Fizzy water. My choice is lemon LaCroix and pomegranate juice, which I use Palm, just the brand. I have no idea if that's how they say that. And then a little bit of lime or other things you could do. You could get fancy and put some mint in too.
Ooh, okay. And have you tried it with other variations aside from like the lemon LaCroix or anything else that you have you
I
spiced it
have.
up?
So I drink more fizzy water than anybody probably should. Like I always have a bunch of different kinds. So we usually have plain and sometimes lime and sometimes lemon in a bunch of different brands. And then the other thing I've put in there sometimes is, and this is good if people are using this at night and they have sleep stuff, you can put tart cherry juice in there instead of the pomegranate, and then you get that benefit because that's supposed to help us sleep.
Wow, I love that little inside tip too.
There you
Very
go.
cool. All right, well, I can absolutely do those things. Seems pretty straightforward. I'm excited for my drink. And so I'd love for you to share your story. You've got, as you mentioned, many different hats that you've worn on the parenting side as well. And so tell us a little bit about what it was like for you, let's start with just entering into being a stepmom and kind of that transition. Can you talk to me a little bit about what that was like for
Yeah.
you?
Sure, I absolutely can. So it was not something that I woke up one day and was like, hey, this is my plan and how I'm going to go forward in my life. But just like anybody else, when you find the people that you're going to date or that become your forever partners or your long-term partners, not all of it is like super strategic and intentional. It's, just kind of what happens that's in front of us. So the story really does begin with I went to a happy hour with friends. And I was with a coworker and then we became friendly and then the relationship got serious. And it just is a part of the story that he had been married and divorced before and had kids. And I was young and at that phase of my life where I was pretty sure that I could handle anything that came my way. And so I charged forward with all the faith and confidence that everything would be fine that you only have when you're in your mid 20s. So I just sort of figured I'm nice and I'm smart and he's nice and they're nice. And what could go wrong? And many, many people in my life, including my parents and my friends, did try and voice some notes of caution, and that this is a very famously challenging position for people to be in. But it was like being hit with a 2x4 in the forehead when it began to get complicated and challenging. I was totally, totally surprised. And by that point, I had added kids to the family because it wasn't immediate. It was a couple years while things come together, and so I'd added kids to the family, and so I was committed. I was all in because that's once you do that. In my case, it's a lot harder to extricate yourself from the
Yeah.
complications. Yeah. So yeah, I talk about this a lot. So if there's anything specific you are curious about, just let me know. It's interesting because so my stepkids are grown. They're in their 30s. This is a long time ago, but it is a very, very famously complicated and challenging relationship, and it's also dramatically undersupported. So one of the challenges for step parents is that you feel, or you don't have to, but many of us feel isolated and
Mm.
unsure of who to reach out to for help because you don't necessarily want to reach out and admit to your friends and your parents and the people in your life that this is hard and that you're not sure you made the right decision, or what do you do with these fabulous little people that are in your life that are pushing all of your buttons, all of them.
Yeah. I'm so curious because I hear you saying that it can be isolating because it can be difficult to kind of reach out or to that resources and support kind of just being readily maybe
Yeah.
available was part of maybe kind of your journey because folks had cautioned you, and like you said, you're kind of going in and of like, I got this, I can do this, no problem. Was that maybe a dynamic of why it was even, maybe more complicated, or complicated it for you to reach
I think
out?
so. Yeah, I think
Okay.
definitely that's a caution. One of the other things is the natural dynamic that the person who is your partner in your relationship is who you would normally talk to about the first things that are going on in your personal life. And talking to my husband about my challenges with his children never worked out well for me. And when I work with other step parents, I caution them to be careful with that because it's not a great dynamic. It's very hard. People are protective of their children and they are defensive
Mm.
when the subject comes up. I think
Yeah.
we know that, right? The mama bear and the papa bear come out. And so it is helpful to find a third party and somebody who's removed from the situation who can be in your corner and help you walk through that without putting stress on your marital relationship.
Mm. Did you find that when you were trying it, because it sounds like you were kind of trial and error, figuring your way through it, did you find
Absolutely.
that it was absolutely putting a strain on your relationship? And kind of, I'm curious, kind of your side of things, and how that felt as, again, coming into this family.
Right. So it absolutely put a challenge on the relationship. One of the things that I tell people, so I've been married over 20 years. And so one of the things that I tell people specifically to give like a permission slip to question their relationship is I probably questioned if I was going to stay in the relationship 100 times a day at different
Wow.
seasons
Yeah.
of the life. And I really but not everybody feels this way, but I really believe that that gives you the opportunity to recommit to what you're doing, right? Everybody tells you marriage is hard, family is hard. And from my perspective, one of the things that can mean is you are redeciding, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is what I want to do. And
Mm.
that is, so even though I was questioning it, it's a way of strengthening my commitment and my resolve.
Yeah, it sounds like in those moments, really kind of challenging you, having to make like an intentional, minutely kind of decision that
Yeah.
we're going to kind of work through this, if I'm hearing you
That I'm going
correctly.
to work through it, that I'm going to do the work, that I'm going to make compromises when they need to be made, that I'm going to reevaluate. If you, I didn't grow up with step parents. Many people do. The estimates, the data is really bad on this, but the estimate is 4 out of 10 people at some point in their life identify as a step parent. And so that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people walking around
Yeah.
living this role, right? But you don't often have representation and you don't often know what this family is supposed to look like when you walk into it. And so, as a person who was working my way through it, I look back now and I can see that what I was doing was redefining what my concept of family could look like, redefining what my identity within a family could look like. Because if you grow up with a fairy tale version, which I didn't have a fairy tale family, but if you grow up with if you're holding on to like a fairy tale or a picket fence, one marriage, two parents, two kids picture in your head, and what you're
Yeah.
living doesn't match that, there is some work to release that
Mm.
so that you can create a concept of happiness for yourself.
Yeah. And I'm so curious, kind of as you're going into that, like you said, having to kind of recreate, and maybe reframe your version of what a family could look like.
Yeah.
Did you find that there were challenges in kind of finding your role and how you fit into the dynamic, even just as far as, discipline and kind of what that would look like? Is that something that was a part of your
Oh,
journey
yeah.
in navigating?
Oh my gosh. Every single day, all day long, all the way. And the today, what I advise people if they ask me about this, I say, and I'll say this because you mentioned it a couple of times, I began by trying to fit myself into the family that had existed before I was there. But the advice that I give people, which is a reframe of concept, right? Just a reframe of mindset and the way you're looking at it, is that if you can, try to focus on creating the new version of the family. So
Mm.
try to not force yourself to match the things that were there before you got there. Some of them you'll carry forward, and honor and respect for the family unit that was there before is really important to making this work. But giving yourself the freedom to redefine it and build what you need. And
Yeah.
so there was never a time where my stepkids have a mom. She's a wonderful person. She loves them greatly. I was never actually trying to replace her or be that person in their life.
Mm-hmm.
But they were little and they needed all kinds of things. And so figuring out all of the things and how we would work together was an ongoing process. And it never ends. And it's exactly like, I mean, really, this does mirror itself in a first family, a family that doesn't have step parents. We reevaluate our roles with our children all the time. You know, the relationship that we have with a toddler or a newborn is completely different than we have with a preteen or a young adult or a college age kid. Like those redefinitions are natural within the relationship.
Yeah. So I'm curious for you, what did that redefining and, like you said, kind of maybe creating and finding that new structure, that new kind of normal for you guys? What did that journey look like for you? What are maybe some examples of things that you intentionally kind of had front of mind of how you were going to redefine?
I would not give myself the credit of saying that I was going to redefine it in the proactive way when I was actually going through it. Most of my story is reactive and figuring it out by the seat of my pants while I was doing it, and so I think that is hopefully helpful to the people who hear the stories because my stories are mostly based on here's how I messed this up and and
Yeah.
based on that and what I learned from that with the people who helped me in the books I read, here's how I suggest we try it moving forward. But living with other people is really hard. I did not have kids when I moved in with my husband, and his kids were there part of the time. And I am super upfront with people that so they were 4 and 8 when I met them, probably 9 and 5 when we moved in together. And
Okay.
I was really, really, I thought they should be quieter. I thought they should have better table manners. I thought they should eat the food they ordered at restaurants. I thought they should sleep in a little more on the weekends. And I thought they should be a lot less messy. And
Mm.
I was wrong about all of those things. Um, I was 100% wrong. I had completely unrealistic expectations of what life with small children would be like. Um, Newsflash, being a child does not actually prepare you to be a parent. It's a completely different experience.
Yes.
And so,
Unfortunately, it doesn't, right? Yeah.
right? Like you think you
Mm-hmm.
know, and you don't know. And you don't know. So we squabbled a lot about things like chores and mess in the house. And it got to the point where like we were working with counselors and it was a very big deal. It was a red line item. Like this is really a problem for me. My husband had a lot of strong feelings about wanting to be able to enjoy the time that he had with his young kids and not have them do chores. And I had been told to let him set the rules and that I should not get involved and that I should back off. And I don't tell people who are step parents to do that as an absolute rule because I think it's nuanced. Because when we came down to like, this is the end of the line for this, I was like, hey, you not wanting to give your kids chores is not the same for me as me living in a house that's always a mess because the kids are there. And so, I can't, like, I don't care. I remember saying to him, a moment of just desperation, I don't care if aliens come down from spaceships and clean up the house. I don't care if you hire someone to bring it in. I don't care if you clean it up. My point is, I don't want to have to live with the mess. And I'm in this position where you've told me I can't speak up and do anything about it.
Mm.
And that's not a fair place for a step parent or anybody to be in a family. I was hugely disempowered. And so that's where we began to shift to creating house rules. Like, what are
Yeah.
the minimum conditions that I needed to feel safe, secure, and happy in the family and in the house? And one of those was I need to be able to say that the house should be a certain level of cleanliness some of the time.
Yeah. And I think you kind of mentioned that idea, right, of coming and joining this family, and that there are so many times where it's like completely just any of your needs, any of your stuff, put that aside. At the same time, like you said, maybe having a disadvantage of the fact that you haven't grown up with these kids, you
That's
haven't
right.
seen them grow, to be able to learn and know kind of their little quirks and what works best for them, and even to prepare yourself. And because at that point you're saying, you said they moved in 9 and 5, is that what you said?
9 and 5, I think, is about where that
Okay.
was. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so even on the younger side, you had 5 years that you weren't there for, it to be able to kind of learn and develop and maybe get accustomed to the fact that kids are louder, and
Oh,
you could say
so loud.
quiet, and
So
they're like,
loud.
oh yeah, I am being quiet. They don't have that sense of how loud their voice is,
Oh my
and so
gosh.
being at that disadvantage.
Yeah, we had an open plan household and they would watch SpongeBob and it was like you couldn't get away from it. You couldn't
Yeah.
get away from it. And I was like, we need a house with doors and walls and barriers.
It's like, now I understand all those houses that were like very
Yeah,
sectioned off.
exactly. So you talk about it. It's so I call it it's the culture of the first family that carries forward, right? And we moved in together, and then we had been together for a while. I don't remember the timeline for this, but say however long we had moved in, and we had moved in like apartment furniture into a house, and so we hit a point where we were buying new couches. Until the time where we bought the new couch, it had been a squabble, not a fight, but there had been like friction with where everybody was sitting in the house. So we have like the preteen and the younger kid, and then maybe we have a baby at this point. And there had been like drama and squabble about where I sat and where the kids sat. And it was really interesting because it was frustrating. It wasn't a huge deal, but it was frustrating and emotional. And I never could quite put my finger on um, why it was happening or what was going on. And then we bought a new couch or a pair of couches, whatever. And we sort of picked the spots where we were going to sit on the new couch. And all of a sudden, as I was watching it, I came to the realization that, of course, they had had their spots on the other couch that were set up before I got there. And
Hmm.
so the kids are kids. They're not going to be able to voice this. And I wasn't there. And my husband, none of us knew. None of us knew. And one of the reasons I share this, I've talked to probably 50 families who had a version of this happen in their family. There was an unwritten secret culture that nobody was aware of that was
Yeah.
causing resistance and friction, and the friction is there and the friction is very real, but like unwrapping it and figuring out why it is there can be tricky. And so all of a sudden, like, we pick these spots, which is a weird thing that families do, right? You have your spot at the dinner table, you have your spot in the car, you have your spot on the
Hmm.
couch, and they pick new spots. And as I watched it happen, I was like, oh wow, now that's gone. Now that's gone. Now we all have our spots on this new couch, and it just sort of faded away. So it's a process. It's a process.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes it really hard, to be honest, is that home is where we go to relax, right? Home is where we shed our armor that we wear all over the world. And so when you're living with people and you've got these levels of complexity, it's hard.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's such a great example, because you're absolutely right. I mean, even if we want to zoom out, we have like our spots. I remember being on the school bus. I mean, like, I sit, kind of
That's
on
right.
the same bench, right, every single day, or in classrooms. And so there is that idea that maybe you wouldn't even think about as being
Yeah.
something that you're kind of having to navigate
Right.
with within this family system, and being able to kind of go, oh, that makes sense, as far as, this is change. And as kids, they may not have the language to be able to even identify, oh yeah, this is my safe, secure space. And so
Right.
going and sitting here, that's my norm, and I know what to do. That's my routine. It's predictable. I feel like so many, even grown adults, change is hard. Much less
Yes.
trying to then ask these kids to change, and maybe missing that piece of it, where it is a change, even though on the surface it may look like just find a different spot on the couch, right? It's not a big deal. That there is maybe a lot more underneath it that
Yes.
isn't maybe something top of mind for folks.
Right. It's like an invisible rule book. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would you say that because I heard you mention at the beginning that some of maybe the growing pains that you're talking about wasn't something that you quite maybe experienced right away, but it was a little bit later. Was that, do you know kind of the catalyst? Like what started actually kind of creating some of that strain? Was it the addition of the new children? What did that look like?
So the addition of the new children was welcomed in my family. So it did create additional work. Fun
Yes.
fact, adding children to your family simplifies nothing. Wonderful process, delightful love for the kids doesn't make anything easier. Um, I think so. There's a period, right? We all know this. There's a period of a relationship where everybody's on their best behavior and everybody's doing all the things. It's like, the honeymoon period. That's true with the kids too. Like everything is new, everything is exciting, every outing is new, all of those things. So I think that the shift from that to living the daily grind is what began to add the friction. Blended families can be very intense, right? So the process, so like a relationship without kids in it, you date, you get to know each other, maybe you move in together. There's like a sequence and a time, and then if my family is any formula, right? We dated, what I did not meet the kids for a significant amount of time, but once I met the kids, that was like a signal that it was a serious relationship, and
Yeah.
everything happened from then very fast. So it was like boom, 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 all of these things back to back, and it was very intense. And so it's like a roller coaster. You're along for the ride. It took a little while for me to feel the pressure and have it catch
Mm.
up. And then when I had a kid, that was the third kid for my husband. My stepkids already had two other kids, so that was the fifth child in the
Okay.
more extended family. Life was complicated. Life was
Yes.
complicated. We
I
had a
imagine.
newborn, high schooler, no, not maybe middle schooler. I mean, everything was going on. Everything was all over the place. And so it was very, very busy, and busy comes with intensity, sure.
Mm. Yeah. So for you, how did you navigate some of that friction, as you mentioned, whether it was from the busyness or just a lot's going on?
So a lot of it feels like you're holding on to the end of a train in a caboose, like everything is just dragging you along and you're just trying to hold on. And I remember that feeling, just really trying to, but I was surprised how, um, and I don't think this is unique to blended families, but I was really surprised how isolating newborn parenting is. I
Mm.
don't know why this was so surprising, but 2:30 in the morning when you're walking a sleeping baby, no one else is around. No one
Yeah.
else is like, your friends are not around, like no one else is around. It's a little bit lonely. And all of the things that happen then they all fall to you when the house gets not to one person necessarily, but they fall to the adults. When the house gets the stomach flu, you can't like punt that to like somebody else. It's like happening to you, right? The
Yeah.
blowout diaper, you're the one who's cleaning it up, and it's like you're looking over your shoulder like, gosh, me, this
Hmm.
was so much more interesting to watch in somebody else's, movie. And so that was a surprise. The challenge for us was definitely the age gap. So I was on a newborn schedule or a baby schedule or a toddler schedule. My stepkids were older and they had other things going on, and so they didn't always coincide.
Hmm.
Like it was, do you take the baby to a little league game? Sometimes. Other times it's like, no, it's bedtime, going home.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. That kind of stuff was challenging. We had a lot of challenges with communication and calendaring, which happens in every family, but it is more complicated when some of the people live in other houses, and is mostly complicated if your partner is like mine and not good at calendaring.
So how do you navigate that? Like you said, you're different schedules, maybe you're trying to calendar, not everybody is a calendar type of person. How was that for you? Did you find like a groove that worked?
Yeah, eventually. So we ended up, it wasn't after the first baby, it was after the second baby was born. We ended up in marriage. I phrase this as a joke. I offer this so that people can laugh. We ended up in marriage counseling over the family calendar. And it was like, I was distraught. And in my mind, what was happening, I put all of the blame on my husband's ex-wife, which turned out to be just wildly unfair. I thought that she was not giving him the information about what was happening on the weekends. So I felt like every week was a surprise.
Mm,
And what was actually happening is that she was giving him the information and he was not sharing it. Um, and so this is a
yeah.
weekly, y'all know how marriage therapy works. It's a weekly standing appointment. We're in the office with the same person over and over again. And so it started with, hey, let's have a set time for the two of you to review what's on the calendar. So it was this is before Google Calendar. Today I use Google Calendar, greatest invention. I live and die by the Google Calendar. But this was literally a printout
Yeah, so
on
one of
like
those.
right exactly. And so but it was like Wednesdays, we would get together, hey, what's happening? And he would say, well, I don't think anything is going on. And then the weekend would come and it was like everything was going on and I knew nothing about it and many things overlapped and I was expected to be cheerful about it and I was in a terrible mood. And
Mm,
so, and we're meeting and we're meeting and we're meeting, and it becomes very clear very fast that he is the weak link in this process, and he knows this. I wrote like a self-published a book about this, about the lessons I learned as a step parent several years ago. This story is in there. It's been reviewed by all the people involved. Um, it wasn't getting any better is the thing. So we had this meeting where he was supposed to do this. We had all of these things. We had the public calendar with everybody with information of everywhere we're supposed to be, which was actually I posted it to the refrigerator and my husband and the kids were making jokes on it is what was actually happening. They were totally
mm,
like, here's when we tell jokes and here's our favorite show. Like nobody was taking it seriously. And two things happened. One was at some point, my stepson looked up at the calendar and he's like, oh, that's happening then. And he realized that the information was there and was helpful. That
yeah.
was like a banner day. The other thing that happened was that the therapist looked at me and he said, he's not getting better at this. Speaking about my husband, he knows because every week he would come and be like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. And then he would never put any information on the calendar. He just never would. And he just looked at me and he was like, he's not getting any better at this. And we can continue to meet and talk about this. But if he's not going to do it, you got to look and find other ways.
Mm,
And I was lucky enough that my stepkids were old enough at this point that they knew that this was happening. This was open communication. My husband's ex-wife and the oldest stepkid just began to directly deliver information to me that I needed so that I was not cut out of the news flow. That doesn't work in every family. There's not always, so
yeah.
that does, but that is the way it happened in my family. Still to this day, my husband is mystified by the family calendar. Mystified. He thinks it is magic. Many, many years ago, we were buying a house, and I gave my calendar to the realtor's assistant to schedule viewings. And my husband was mystified. He's like, how does she know when you're available? And I'm like, welcome to the 21st century. I really, I don't know how to help you here anymore. Like how are you handling your calendar?
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
I don't have any. I don't know how else to explain it.
Right. I was like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think I just wanted to circle back to what you mentioned as far as, we landed in marriage therapy because of our calendar and just normalize as a couples therapist, you are not alone. Like I would probably lose count if I had to like think about the number of couples where it is something where they're going there and they say just that. I don't know, we're getting stuck on this particular piece and I don't know how to move through it, and it's causing a lot of friction, it's causing a lot of distress. And so if that is something, please know that you are not alone. That is something that happens, because sometimes it can be really hard to try to get unstuck from those things that are really impactful in your life when you're trying to do it just in yourself, because then emotions can flare up, even if it's not intentional, defenses can go up, and then we end
Yes.
up on a topic that's completely not even about the calendar anymore, right? And we're now talking
Yeah.
about who didn't do the dishes or whatnot.
And that's right. A lot of times it shows up in like this was, we knew what the fight was about. And it was very concretely about that, but it shows up all over the place. And communication, and this is something, people will try and separate communication as some sort of separate issue that has to be worked on, but communication touches everything. And
Yeah.
so, that is, and what we, the idea of having a dedicated meeting where we were talking about the calendar was such a small idea, but I continue to be fascinated by the fact that the people in my life cannot read my mind. And so, really being able, like, the very first thing I try and think about now when there's a conflict popping up is like, hey, are we on the same page? Like, do we have the same information?
Mm-hmm.
And circling back and saying, what are we like? Let's talk about it. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about it is a powerful tool.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that reading mind portion, because I think most everyone kind of goes into it with that thought. I know I have.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially when we've been in a relationship with somebody for a longer period of time, we kind of get comfortable in going, you've known me for this long. You should know, right, that this is what I'm thinking, or this is how I'm feeling about it. And it does kind of create this barrier, because even if they could take a guess, maybe one every five guesses is right, but
Fair point.
we're complicated people. We're constantly growing. The way that we think about things is constantly changing. The way that we handle things is changing. And so if there isn't, like you said, kind of a consistent, intentional check-in of like, hey, let's just make sure we're actually communicating about what's on my mind, maybe how I received it or how I meant it, right? That we miss those opportunities to kind of move away from the assumption and really move into a place of curiosity, where we're talking to this person of, I'd really
Yes.
like to know kind of what's on your mind versus me talking for you.
As you go through that, I think I realized I forgot one more thing that we had to do with the calendaring to really make the changes work. And that was, and this falls sort of into communication and boundaries. We set up a rule where if I didn't know about something, I was not expected to
Mm.
participate, and nobody could be mad at me. Right. So, and there were some other things in there, like the positive intent and permission to make mistakes and stuff like that. But so if we got to the weekend and somebody had a birthday party and it conflicted with a baby's nap or, a trip to whatever, right? I wasn't expected to drop everything and be a part of it. And I wasn't expected to be anything other than annoyed by the fact that I wasn't, like, all of that was okay. And that was a really important piece of that, which is because otherwise, if you want, some of these things are cool, right? It's like dance shows and, little league games and fun
Yeah.
things, that people would want to do. And you're dealing with like, what is my expectation in the family and what's expected of me? And am I an okay adult in this family if I'm not going to all the things? Like, aren't I supposed to be the one that buys the birthday presents? Like all the gender roles
Mm.
and all the things like that. And that gave me permission to be like, okay, so listen, little Tommy's birthday party is not on the calendar and you're on your own, buddy. Go have a good time, figure out the gift. I'm off to the playground with the little kids.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know you had mentioned as well, kind of a part of this journey for you, as your kids are growing up, and we're kind of working through figuring out that new normal, that kind of you experienced a loss in your own personal,
Yep.
side of things, that kind of added to what you were having to navigate and journey through. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. When my son was just about 2 years old, my father died from a heart attack. So that would have been 2, 5, like 11 and 16 were the
Wow.
ages of the kids. That's not right. So 16 and 12 would have been, so 12 and 16. So my dad died, and he was in the full extended family. So there's 4 adults, me, my husband, his ex-wife, and her new husband. I am the youngest of those four adults, but I was the first one to lose a parent. So this was the first of the grandparents to pass away, and the
Wow.
first time as a family that we had dealt with that experience. And so I had to figure out how to tell my kids, the stepkids, the extended family, everybody,
Mm-hmm.
everybody.
Yeah. Was that difficult to navigate in the sense that you just lost a person in your life?
Yeah.
A father, a parent figure in that sense, while also still having roles and responsibilities, and your kids are still doing things in their life. I mean, was that? Could you say a little bit more about that?
It's really hard. Grief, anybody who's been through it, grief of any kind, it just sort of dominates. It pushes you completely into a space you haven't been. And losing a parent well, I guess probably every kind of grief is unique, is the way I'll say that. But one of the ways that people describe it is it's a club that you join that a lot of people are in, but that you never wanted to, right?
Mm.
Most of us will get there. It's the appropriate sequence of events that we will outlive our parents, right? So that is a thing that happens. But I reached out to every every therapist that we'd ever worked with, and I was like, what do I do?
Yeah.
And that was very helpful. And the reason I bring that up is that I was asking for help for how to tell the kids because I did not know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the therapist, when I was on the phone, I was looking over. I was kind of like you, but I don't know. You're looking at a camera. I was looking out a window in my kitchen. I was standing by my sink, talking on the phone, looking out a window in my kitchen. And he's like, "Well, how are you?" And I remember saying to him, I was like, in a moment of, take a deep breath and just be honest with the person whose job is to help you. Be honest with your doctors. Good advice. I said, sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind because everything feels a little bit different. The colors feel different, the air feels different, the noise feels different, everything feels different. And I share this with people anytime they're going through grief because what he said to me really helped me move through the process. He said, "You feel different because it is different. For your
Mm.
entire life, your father has been a part of your life. And now, for the very first time, he's not. Every single thing is different." And so I was like, oh, I am not losing my mind. I am living my life in a totally new way.
Yeah. And wow, to kind of in that moment, it sounds like validating and also normalizing, like
Yeah,
it feels different because things are like this is
things are
uncharted
different.
territory.
Yeah, exactly. So the little kids were little and they process things in a totally different way than big kids. And he helped me understand how that was going to happen. They don't really know. The little one was little. He didn't really know. And the big kids they were good. The way it actually shook down is that my stepdaughter came over and got the little kids and took them over to her mom's house where they stayed for the day while I
Mm.
went up and dealt with it, which is one of my favorite one of my favorite stories about a blended family, like why it doesn't work out in a lot of blended families where you have those tight connections, but there was no question, there was no if, ands, or buts. It was just like, yep, we will help. And I felt
Wow.
very safe and secure that the little kids were with their siblings, and that somebody was watching over them, and it was very helpful.
Yeah. I'm I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind kind of touching on, because you mentioned just this this awesome community that was coming around and supporting you, um, and being kind of the ex-wife that was caring for your kids, and how what were maybe steps that you intentionally kind of consciously took to be able to get to a place where you had a relationship like that, where, as you mentioned, you were dropping off your kids in that really, vulnerable space, moment of need, and it was able to be a place where you felt that they were safe and secure, and that it was, uh, you know, a burden kind of off of your already very full plate in that moment.
So yeah, this part of this dynamic, I will say that I did with a little bit of intention. So my parents were divorced growing up, and that's a dynamic. Neither one of them remarried, but that was a dynamic that I was familiar with. The co-parenting across houses, and so from the very beginning, I had the intentional plan of not adding to the chaos, to being a part of the solution at all times, and not adding drama. And I think that that's a helpful mindset. Is the way I'm going to go into this relationship going to be part of building a healthy, strong family for this and all of the children, or is it gonna cause conflict? So I didn't always nail it. I didn't always
Yes.
get it right. Okay. And one of the stories I share about this, because you won't know when you step in it. You
Mm.
don't know. You don't know when you do it. But then there's almost always times to course correct and make corrections. So when my stepkids were little, I said something very, very glib about the benefits of that I didn't like artificial sugars, and so people should drink full sugar drinks and not diet sodas. And they did what kids do, which is they went to the other house and they repeated it. They
Yes.
parrot it back.
As children do.
Expect it, it's gonna happen. And I didn't have all of the information, and I heard back directly from their mom that she was like, I don't appreciate you saying that. And then she let me know that her mom is diabetic, so they drink diet soda in that house all the time. And of
Mm.
course you do, because then it makes absolute sense, right? And I didn't have the information. And so,
Yeah.
what did I do? I apologized. I apologized and I said, I'm really sorry because that was inappropriate for me to make such a global statement that no one should ever do this. This is wrong. This is absolute. Every house and every family eats different foods and different things and different preferences, and there's a million ways to feed your body. And so it was wrong of me, even though I didn't realize it, to put that pressure on somebody else and to do that. But I didn't know it when I was saying it. I was just saying what I was thinking in my kitchen.
Yeah. I'm curious, how were you able to get to that place to make that repair? Because I feel like for many folks, you receive kind of that feedback, and instinct, like knee-jerk reaction is to like defend, right? And to be like, no, no, no. And sometimes people will double down, or just kind of,
Yeah.
what allowed you to go to that space of saying, yeah, like, that's on me, I own that, I'm so sorry I said that.
I think I don't know that I have a great answer for this. Like, I think that it's a skill that I've practiced over the years, in not escalating. Like, this is today talking to me in the future. Like, now I've been trained as a mediator and I have like actual de-escalation strategies and things. But this is way before that. I just had an instinct of not making it worse. And there are
Oh,
probably 1,000 other stories from me at that same age where I did double down and do that. But this was an instance where I was like, oh, mea culpa. Like I
yeah,
have erred and I apologize.
yeah.
But I just think that I lucked into it at that point. There's other stories where it's ridiculous where I was taking a firm stand on things like rice-a-roni, that I did the exact opposite. So
Well, and it's hard. It's hard to catch yourself in that moment, especially like you said, if it's something that's not practiced every day, or you've never
yeah,
seen it done before, it wasn't modeled, it wasn't taught, because they don't teach those things, in your standard
I know,
education
and
course.
they should.
They really should.
They really should. Do we
But
really
that's,
need to know a 5 paragraph theme, or should we learn about interpersonal communication and how to de-escalate a fight? Because I think one of those is more common as an adult. I really do.
oh man, I could speak on that soapbox all day long. All right. Well, I'm so thankful for you being willing to kind of share a little bit of your story, and I like to close things out with, if you had access to a DeLorean, got to go back to the past, is there anything that you would offer to yourself, and offer to anybody who's listening now that's maybe currently going through what you've experienced?
I do. So when I started talking about being a step parent, the question that people would ask me is they would say, if you knew then what you know now, would you do it again? And I think that's a really hard question because I can't actually roll back time, and it puts me in a spot where I have to evaluate things that I've already done. So that's a hard question to ask. But as I tried to answer that question 5,227 times, I eventually realized that the thing that I truly, truly what could have done and wish I would have had the foresight to do is to do a round of therapy myself, working on myself early on in the relationship and in the marriage. Because what is interesting is that all of these things, parenting, step parenting, it is a weird time machine mirror onto your own childhood, onto your own upbringing, and it brings up all of
Yes.
this weird stuff. And so does probably marriage. You know more about that than I do. The more aligned you are and at peace with your own past and your own experience and the decisions you've made, the easier all of this stuff is because
Mm.
it's just so much better and the better decisions that you make. And so that is the thing that if I honestly could do it, that's the thing I would do again. To know, be stronger in myself at that point. And I don't think there's, I think that if, I mean, no one is ever, very few people are actually going to do this, but like, what a beautiful thing it would be. It's like, here, I'm about to make a decision that's going to impact the rest of my life. Like every single meal I eat, every single trip I take, all of these things. Maybe let's spend 6 months doing, self-development and therapy on myself and then jump in.
Hmm. And what I really appreciate about you saying that is, not only I'm a therapist, so I agree, everybody, I think could benefit, but also I think that what I've seen, what I've learned, even just on my own journey, is that even though we may not have what we would consider big T traumas in our life, things happen. We
Yep.
experience life, and parenting, as you mentioned, is, oh my goodness, such a mirror, and things come up that we didn't even know were in there, but all of a sudden, our neck hairs
That's right.
bristle a little bit, and we feel that tension. And as you mentioned, if we are able to seek that support, take a little bit of time to go in there and explore that in a safe way, that it gives us at least an awareness that when we feel that happening, now it's not just coming from a reactive, oh, I don't know what happened, I went from 0 to 100 like that. Now we're at least a little go, okay, that's what it's bringing up for me. That's maybe
Right.
a little bit of why it's landing. And so it just kind of, I think, empowers you with so much more knowledge, even just about yourself and maybe how your brain works.
Right. And along that lines, like when we don't do the work, um, and this is like we are more likely to expect that other people will take responsibility for the things that are happening when
Mm.
really it's us that has to
Yeah.
do it, right? So it's like if I'm exploding because I think that that's the only thing I can do, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you should handle it differently. That is not a workable solution usually in a family. Like nobody else knows what's going on. Right? It's like it has to get to the point where I can deal and take ownership with the fact that, yeah, I'm going to explode, and it needs to be safe to like. This is one of the things. Like it needs to be safe for people to have a reaction inside a family. Like you have
Oh,
to be. It
absolutely.
has to be
Yeah.
okay for like. In our family, there was so much going on, and there were times where I was so overstimulated. It has to be okay to like have that breakdown and come back. It happens. It
Yeah.
happens to all of us. um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, understanding that it starts from within is helpful.
I love that. Well, Amy, thank you so much for being, again, willing to jump on, to share your story, share some of the insights and things that you've learned, because we don't have a manual, even though I wish we did. And also thank you for sharing this yummy drink. I had a couple sips while we were chatting, and it's
It's
nice and
refreshing.
refreshing. It is.
It's refreshing.
So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We will see you next time. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.